On 27th of April 1948, Prince Albert Jacob married his wartime sweetheart, Mary Gore, at Oldbury Registry Office in Birmingham. He was a black RAF veteran from Trinidad, and she was white, English and Jewish. Jake's family were too far away to come. Such was her father's objection to the match that none of Mary's family attended the wedding. The couple were subjected to discrimination in post-war austerity Birmingham. People shouted to Mary across the street that she should not be with Jake. But how did it come to this? That a happy couple, very much in love, received so much criticism, when Jake had been made welcome in Yorkshire just 4 years before for his RAF training. As the Second World War closed, the RAF restored the pre-war colour bar towards recruitment as an unwritten rule. Despite the contribution of Caribbeans to the war effort, Air Marshal Sir John Slessor is recorded in a September meeting as saying a gentleman who looks as though he has just dropped out of a tree is clearly unlikely to make as good an officer or NCO as an otherwise less highly qualified white man because the men won't take it from him. The number of black people employed in the RAF rapidly declined with demobilisation, even after the colour bar was quietly lifted again in 1947. Official policy repatriated colonials as soon as possible, although they were entitled to receive RAF training for employment in a trade before they left. RAF veteran Johnny Smythe was employed by the Colonial Office to help veterans get back into work in the Caribbean. However, economic conditions in the Caribbean colonies were still very poor and unemployment was high. Meanwhile, a war-weary and debt-ridden Britain, now subjected to even more severe rationing, had an estimated 1.3 million job vacancies to fill as the country's blitzed towns and cities were rebuilt. An appeal went out to the Commonwealth and Empire for workers. The British Nationality Act of 1948 confirmed that British subjects throughout the remaining empire, but also citizens of newly independent Commonwealth countries, such as India, had the right to settle freely in the United Kingdom. The government organised programmes for Europeans displaced by the war and prisoners of war to work and settle in the UK. Caribbeans desperate for work, some with skilled training in a trade from their time in the RAF, noticed the plentiful advertisements for labour in British newspapers they were sent. On 22nd of June 1948, the Empire Windrush arrived at Tilbury Docks in Essex, carrying 1,027 passengers. 802 passengers gave their last country of residence as somewhere in the Caribbean, and most of these intended to settle in the UK. Many of the men were RAF veterans who knew Britain well and had a skilled trade. They were supported on board by veteran Johnny Smythe, who was now a senior officer on the ship. Pathé News, seen in cinemas across the UK, covered the event positively, commenting that they served this country well. In Jamaica, they couldn't find work. Discouraged but full of hope, they sailed for Britain, citizens of the British Empire coming to the mother country with good intent. But behind the official welcome, they were not wanted. Prime Minister Clement Attlee privately referred to the arrival of these Caribbean migrants as an incursion and suggested diverting the Empire Windrush to Africa, where its passengers could be employed as agricultural workers picking groundnuts. The British Nationality Act had been passed to ease white migration between Britain and mostly white-populated dominions such as Canada. It was not foreseen at the time that it might lead to extensive migration of brown and black British subjects or Commonwealth citizens. Black RAF veterans returning to Britain as part of the Windrush generation of economic migrants like Jacob found little welcome in the mother country they had made sacrifices for in war. There were racist assumptions made that people of colour would never be able to integrate into British society, even though Caribbean people were steeped in knowledge of Britain through their education. Veterans no longer had the support of colonial office welfare officers, nor did RAF regulations protect them from discrimination. They found accommodation hard to come by and encountered signs warning, "No blacks, no dogs, no Irish." In effect, a housing colour bar. Black people were routinely barred from hotels, dances, social clubs and jobs within Birmingham's public transport system. Black men daring to dance with white women could be assaulted. Although there were plenty of job vacancies as the economy began to boom in the 1950s, black people could often find only the lowliest employment. Jake Jacob recalled that in Birmingham, there was a lot of work, but for a black man, you couldn't get a job unless you were willing to sweep the floor or do the lowest of the low. Then you couldn't get a job no matter how well educated you were. He also recalls white people touching his hair on buses. Prime Minister Sir Winston Churchill, back in office in 1951, grew increasingly concerned about the growth of black communities. He asked chief constables to report confidentially to him in response to the question, "Is it true that the coloured community as a whole, or particular sections of it, are generally idle or poor workmen, live under bad conditions either from choice or out of necessity, or are addicted to drug trafficking or other types of crime?" Churchill even considered running his next general election campaign under the slogan, "Keep Britain White." Some white British people made their new neighbours feel welcome. Jake and Mary Jacob were befriended by members of Mary's Jewish community, and Jake was helped into a successful career as a post office manager with support from an RAF association. However, it was hard for Caribbeans to stomach the discrimination and rejection in a land they had long thought of as home. Could things get any worse?